Hello, good morning. It's wonderful to be here today. This is my first time in Shanghai, and I was just in Beijing just a few days ago, and they told me how beautiful Beijing is and how Beijing is the place to be for technology. But of course, now that I'm here in Shanghai, I see where the actual place is for technology, which seems to be here. I'd like to thank the organizers, Wanshan Holdings, for organizing these events. And my background is in healthcare and medicine. And the reason I care about blockchain and cryptography is that I see both of those technologies as being critical for all the things we would like to do in the future to improve healthcare. Healthcare is incredibly important to 7.6 billion people, and it is one of the largest pieces of the global economy. The global economy right now is about $76 trillion. Of that, about $7 trillion are spent on healthcare. So it's an incredibly important part of the global economy and a real opportunity for distributed technologies. I apologize with what I'm going to say. Healthcare is very complicated, and certainly in the US healthcare system, there are no simple fixes. Certainly we all agree, if we think about healthcare, that we would like healthcare to be more effective, and very frequently what happens in healthcare is that things happen too late. So instead of seeing a doctor early before we have significant disease, we typically end up seeing doctors only very late, once we have a real problem that's then also much more difficult to address. Here's some other issues with healthcare. Typically it's very expensive, and it can also be very hard to use. Imagine when you have symptoms, you all know how difficult it is to find a doctor, talk to a nurse, get medications delivered to your door, figure out what the correct diagnosis is, and so forth. So here's some of the problems with healthcare around the world in 2018. Generally, there are relatively few big breakthroughs in terms of the technology or diagnostics. There are a few exceptions. Healthcare tends to be reactive, so we only go to the doctor when we're sick. There is very little correlation of healthcare outcomes with spending. And if you're an American, by far the best thing you can do for your health is to emigrate to Cuba, because health outcomes in Cuba tend to be better than in the US, despite much reduced spending. One of the biggest problems in healthcare is poor scaling. The global population is at 7.6 billion people, and all those people are getting older. So the average age of the global population is increasing, and that means we need ever more doctors, ever more healthcare providers, ever more nurses. And that is leading to, we can already anticipate the problems this is going to lead to just in a few years. So one thing we'd like to do is really get at the scaling problem. And the final thing that's very important to me is poor access. Every single person in this room, by definition, is probably relatively well off. But for every person in this room, there are hundreds or thousands of people who do not have good access to doctors all around the world. And this is, of course, related to also the scaling problem. So what are the kind of things we can imagine doing? And don't worry. In just a few minutes, I'll talk about blockchains and cryptography explicitly, but all I'm doing right now is setting the stage for some of those directions. So generally speaking, what would we like to do? Here are some of the things that technology companies in Silicon Valley are working on. Every single big technology company right now, Google, Apple, Facebook, cares about health, because they think that technology and smartphones and wearables and machine learning, when put together, will allow them to build very interesting new products that they can emphasize in the future. One of the trends is this notion of consumerizing healthcare, making healthcare much easier to access, going to a drugstore and buying medications and diagnostic tests. The other direction is to move healthcare out of the hospital into the home. because as soon as you take someone and you put them in a hospital, you run the risk of complications and many other issues. So the goal is to keep people healthy in the home. You want to detect things as early as possible, and you want to increase compliance. One of the biggest problems in healthcare is that if a doctor prescribes medications to a person, very frequently those people do not take the drugs. They do not take the medicines, but they simply throw them away. Here's an example of how not to do future healthcare. And that's the example of IBM Watson. For many years, IBM Watson has been pursuing healthcare AI, and the idea has been to take a computer, give the computer everything we know about medicine and healthcare, and then sell access to this healthcare AI to hospitals and doctors. There's a great article on this business case in the Wall Street Journal. It's called IBM Has a Watson Dilemma. So if you're interested in the details, please have a look at this Wall Street Journal article. And so the general question I'd like to think about for a second is, how did IBM fail and waste $17 billion on healthcare? So here's how IBM thought about AI in healthcare. The idea was to train Watson on the human medical literature, and the product IBM generated is a 13th doctor. So the notion is that for example, in cancer diagnostics, what happens in the US is that you take 12 doctors around the table, and those doctors will argue, they will reach a consensus, and then once you figure out what the diagnosis is, you will then develop a treatment plan. IBM said, oh, we're going to take the same 12 doctors and we're going to add one more doctor to it, a 13th doctor called IBM Watson. And hospitals are going to pay us for this 13th doctor. But of course, if you come from AI, you know exactly what the problem is with this strategy. The problem with the strategy is that if you train an AI on the human medical literature, the AI, of course, will not do better than the training set. So if you're a good hospital anyway, you will see no improvement with Watson, and hospitals will stop using it. And that's exactly what happened with IBM. So does this mean there is no room for AI in healthcare? Absolutely not. I'm extremely optimistic and excited about the role of AI in healthcare. And my perspective is that IBM completely misunderstood the opportunity. And now we're getting into territory that is closer to distributed systems and trust and scaling and privacy and so forth. So my personal position on the real opportunity is, what if you are not a billionaire who lives in Manhattan and has access to Memorial Sloan Kettering? What if you are one of the 99% of the rest of the world that does not have access to a 12 human doctor tumor board? And that's where I think the real opportunity is. The real opportunity is to take these healthcare technologies and find ways of making them accessible to billions of people at incredibly low cost. So the real opportunity for healthcare AI is scaling exquisite medical insights to an extremely large number of people. And if you want to do that, then you need certain technologies that have to do with transparency, privacy, data, monetizing data, allowing people to delete data, computing on data, and incentivizing individuals to change their habits. And many of these things can be addressed by either cryptographic techniques or distributed ledgers or cryptoeconomics. So now let's talk blockchains and distributed systems. So the future of medicine, as far as I'm concerned, is about identity. Who am I dealing with? Who is this person? What are their symptoms? Then a lot of information about those individuals and other people around them. We have to compute on the data. The individuals have to trust the system to use that system, and money is really important. Money is important to support the development of new technologies, and also to incentivize individuals to change their behavior. For example, to take more steps, or to eat less youtiao, or to do other things that keep them healthy. So here are some of the things you can imagine doing. So here's 5 easy steps. So the first thing that's really important for the future of healthcare is to make data much more available to startups and other companies who want to build digital medical technologies. One of the saddest things for me personally is when I talk to students in the Stanford AI lab and they say, Jan, I've just spent 2 years collecting a training set, then I trained a medical classifier, then I published a science paper showing how this AI classifier is much better than any human physician, and then I left Stanford to start a company in AI advertising. And I say, why did you do that? You've spent years preparing yourself for a career in healthcare AI, and their answer is that it's super hard to get access to healthcare data, and even if they had the data, it's very hard to distribute the technologies to a large number of people. And so part of the story here is going to build crypto-economic systems around healthcare data, making it possible for people to monetize them, share them, and control this information. The second part is getting people to change behavior. All of us in this room know that we should do things differently. Maybe we should move more, exercise more, sleep more, eat more apples, and do all these other things we know are important for health, but all of us struggle with changing our behaviors. For example, what Singapore is doing right now, they have 500,000 step counters that keep track of how much people are moving. And if you take 10,000 steps a day, you get 5 Singapore dollars. And that's an example of taking a wearables technology and economic incentives and a health goal and putting them together in a system that increases the activity of individuals and hopefully making them healthier. I think crypto-economic systems are also important for this. The second part is this distribution problem. If you have a medical classifier and it works very well, how do you get it out of the lab? How do you get it into the hands of hundreds of millions of people? And that's the distribution problem. And the most obvious thing here is you need some kind of app store for health apps. However, that leads to the next problem. If you go to the Apple App Store right now, there are hundreds of thousands of apps. How shall you choose? If you're a consumer, I'm a parent, I have 2 children. And imagine I want to use a health app to help me treat my children. How shall I pick the best one? And that means in the future, as healthcare becomes more and more digital, we're going to have to, as consumers, make good choices. And that means we're going to care a lot about relative performance of healthcare AI and reputation. That's why I'm personally spending a lot of time looking at distributed prediction markets as potentially one technology that will allow us to do real-time relative evaluation of digital healthcare technologies. So reputation is going to be very important. And I won't talk about flush toilets or phones right now. The fourth part is people have to trust the medical system. At Stanford, I'm the principal investigator of a study looking at mental health. The point of that study is to do early detection of depression. And in most countries, people do not like to talk about any kind of change in mental state or mental conditions like depression. There are big social stigmas. And so what we really want are technologies where individuals can anonymously interact with healthcare AI, for example, to reduce the stigma and get the number of people that are getting effective treatment to be much larger. So one of the most effective things I can do at Stanford to get a lot of our students to enroll in our studies is to tell them, look, it's going to be completely anonymous. No one is going to know who you are. And when I tell them that, then all of a sudden, we get a large number of students who will then join our study. So trust and privacy anonymity is really important. Parenthetically, one of the most interesting technologies for healthcare in general are cryptographic technologies that allow data to be shared and accessed in ways that do not give the recipient of the data control over the data. So technologies, for example, like multi-party computation, homomorphic encryption, and so forth, are super interesting to think about for healthcare data. And we've talked about this briefly. My dream, and I'm sure a lot of you here share the same dream, is the possibility of developing exquisite digital health technologies and making them available to hundreds of millions or billions of people around the world. By the way, all my family are doctors, so I love human doctors. My grandparents are human doctors, my wife is a human doctor, her sister-in-law is a doctor, so they're all doctors. But there's only a finite number of really good doctors. And so the real opportunity is to figure out ways of making good healthcare available to a large number of people. Okay, so here's the 5 points. Crypto-economic systems to get data to move, distributed app store for health apps, privacy-preserving health analytics, figure out ways to distribute the technology to a large number of people, and then crypto-economic systems for incentivizing health behaviors like moving, taking medications, exercising, and so forth. So this is not an idle dream. This is not impossible, and we do not have to ask governments for permission. So with the technologies we already have, and I think I'm running out of time, we have the technical know-how to start building these kind of systems, and we don't have to ask anyone for permission. When I talk to hospitals and healthcare systems and lawyers and doctors, they give me all these reasons for why this is impossible. But I don't think so. And so I'm super enthusiastic to find people to work with in this general area and really make this dream possible. So humanity can do a lot better. All 7.6 billion people should have ready access to exquisite information about their health. And one way to do this is supplement human doctors with digital solutions distributed to reach everyone on the planet. Thank you so much.